Welcome to Mr. R's art class. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Thumbs, subs, and ring that bell. Okay, so for this project, we're going to go ahead and use some 2D references and bring those over into Tinkercad. So we want to have a better understanding of bone structure, of anatomy, and the most simplest form. So we're going to take some of these two-dimensional shapes and illustrations and create 3D forms of them, 3D models of them. So this would be a reference that we use. We need to make sure that we download this document and we use this as a reference. And we're going to recreate some of these illustrations in 3D. So this example here for this illustration would be recreated inside of Tinkercad. Same thing with this next reference here. We're going to recreate those inside of Tinkercad as well. So this is going to give us a better understanding of anatomy, of how to think of anatomy in the most basic, simplest forms in 3D. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing you need to do is go ahead and download this PDF. Let me just show you what it looks like first before we download it. So it's going to have some different images of hands. It's going to have different ways that we could start out our 3D model using cylinders. And then it's going to have some different ways that you could position your hands here. So it kind of shows a 3D perspective of what the hand looks like in order to make it look a lot more realistic. Alright, so these are just some references that you could use. So let's go ahead and start inside of Tinkercad. Let's close this off, download it. Click on download. Let's go over to our downloads folder. I'm going to hold down Control N. Click on documents. Go over to downloads on this one here. There's the PDF. Let's go over here to the left hand side. Click on the academic year, the period you have my class, the semester we're currently in. Let's create a project folder. There's different ways you could do it. You could click on home, you could right click here, or you could click on this yellow folder at the top. I'm going to right click and hit new. I'm just going to call this 3D hand. Open up that folder. Click on the file and drag it over for my references. I can just minimize that. So let's go over to Tinkercad, create new design. And I can put these windows side by side. Sometimes you might have issues with that, so depending whatever works for you. Otherwise you could hold down the Windows button and tap the right arrow to bring that over to the right side. You can open up your PDF over here. Windows button on the left side here. So if you need more space, you can always make one window bigger than the other. So I'm going to start with this second page here. I'm going to start with some cylinders. So I'm going to grab this cylinder. And I'm going to try to recreate these 2D images here, starting with some 3D models. And if these windows give you an issue, you could go ahead and just go full screen and just go back and forth. So I'm going to click on this top box here to make it a little bit longer. You could, any shape that you already create, you could copy and paste it. So let's go back to my reference. And I have 3 cylinders about the same size. So you're going to try to recreate that 2D image in 3D though. So I have one box. I'm going to duplicate. And it just places the image right on top of each other. And then I'm going to hit duplicate one more time. And it places the image right on top. Alright, so we have that first part of that completed. Now I could just duplicate this. Bring it down a bit. And then maybe go to the right angle and bring it back. So you're just recreating that 2D illustration in 3D so you get a little bit more comfortable with creating something that is realistic from 3D models. Alright, so I'm going to change the rotation of that cylinder. Maybe a little bit more. Let's do about 25. Duplicate. Move it back a bit. And rotate so you can only see the front part of that cylinder. I'm going to go from the front view. Maybe from the top front view. And you can always click on these boxes here and play with these angles. So it actually moved it backwards. So I'm going to go, let's do -50. Maybe a little bit more, move it down. that looks like that same angle there. Now I'm going to move the cylinder downward. I'm going to duplicate. Undo, because I scaled it just a little bit right now by accident. So the cylinder is actually facing downward, but you're still able to see the bottom part of the sphere. So maybe I just need to rotate here. Let's do -50 again. Move this up and over. I'm going to have to zoom in here. Maybe rotate just a little bit more. Maybe scoot this over to the side. Okay, so there are those pieces. I'm just going to move everything over here to the left. Now I'm going to try to recreate this finger here. So again, any pieces that you already created, you do not have to remake. You copy and paste or duplicate. And scoot this over. See what the hand looks like. So it's slightly bent from the front sides of the cylinder. I'm going to go to the right side here. I'm actually trying to rotate this. Let's see. Let's do about -25. Maybe move it forward a bit. And let's do -50. And then down. Alright, so now this looks like a bent finger. Or at least this example of a bent finger. Maybe I could just select everything and change the angle. Just slightly. So there's a PDF there. Selecting everything, duplicating, and then scooting over. Let's see if I can make a cylinder here look slightly like a finger. I'm going to click on this drop down menu. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click on that front cylinder, add some bevels to it to make it look a little bit more rounded, some sides, and add some segments. Alright, so now some of these are starting to look a little bit more like fingers. Just to give you an idea of when we're looking at something that's realistic, how can we break it down to the most simplest form or three-dimensional shape. Alright, so this finger is a little bit more bent here, so we can work on that one. You don't have to make your fingers look really realistic. You could try doing that. You could add a fingernail too, if you want to. But let's go back and add that finger that is a little bit more bent here. So I'm going to click on this one. Let's go ahead and add 25 degrees and then 50 degrees to this. So you have to click on that little arch there. Let's click on that arch there and let's do another 25. We might have to do a little bit more, maybe 50. Maybe even 75 there. Go to the front view, scooting over, and then bringing this down a bit. Alright, there we go. So there is that first page there. Now let's go back to the PDF. Let's scroll down. Again, these are just some of the references of why we have these different cylinders, and we're using these cylinders as fingers, and then each of these circles represents a sphere that we need to add. So let's try to recreate this document here next. So you go back and I could save this. So we could do we could call this as cylinder, fingers, Give it a second here to save, and then we could do an export. Make sure you have everything in the design selected, and then download as an STL. Alright, I'm going to go back to Tinkercad, create the next document, create new design. I'm going to change the name before I forget. I'm going to call this hand wedge. Alright, let's go back to that PDF. So we have one box here. And let me go ahead and flatten this out. I'm going to go to the top view. And let's just make this look like a flat square here. That looks good. I'm going to go back and then add some cylinders and a sphere. I'm going to bring this down just a bit. So a sphere for the joints and then a cylinder for the finger. You could go to change the view here. Let's do 90 degrees. Let's go back to the PDF. And again, each finger is 3 different cylinders and 2 joints. So I'm going to go to top view. Click on this black square here and then drag up. So again, we're looking at this from the top view. And this is a knuckle, so that first sphere needs to go inside of the wedge there. You could either make this a little bit shorter so you can see the knuckle. Move the cylinder down. Maybe scale it down as well. We're going to have to add another sphere inside here. So I already have a sphere, so I'm going to duplicate. Hold down Shift. Top view. Alright, I already have that cylinder selected. Duplicate. I'm going to hold down Shift while I have that sphere selected. Also cylinder, duplicate, and then move up. That top cylinder might be a little bit shorter, should be a little bit shorter, because it's just the fingertips, so you could probably make that a little bit shorter. Maybe this could start getting a little bit more realistic, so I'm going to go to top view, click on that black box to make that a little bit. So this could be the right hand or left hand, depending on how you look at it. But this references just the left hand here, if it's facing away from us. Going back. So I'm going to duplicate, scoot over. This will be the index finger. We still need to make a thumb. So maybe this index finger could be a little bit shorter if that's going to be our middle finger. I'm trying to select everything here. And scale it down. Hold down Shift, grab a corner. Maybe we could select everything here, duplicate, scoot that over to make our ring finger. And maybe duplicate one more time to make the pinky. The pinky is a little bit smaller, so I'm going to hold down Shift. And then scoot that over just a bit. Now we just need to make the thumb here. And we also have a wrist at the very end. We also need to add these other knuckles. So that knuckle might be a little bit smaller. Top view. You could duplicate. Duplicate. Zoom in probably just to Make sure you're selecting the right thing. Duplicate. Make that finger a little bit wider. And once we start bending these fingers, it'll look a little bit more realistic here. Again, we have to think of this as just the skeleton here. And then the thumb. So I'll probably use a sphere again. I'm not holding shift down, I'm just trying to get an oval shape. I'm going to drag this down. But you could grab some of these cylinders from your pinky if you want to. Duplicate. And bring those over. And I'm going to slightly rotate this. And the tip is just slightly bent a little bit more. Alright, so you could pick this hand up and start playing with some of these cylinders. Try to create a closed hand, or a hand that's about to close. So you're going to have to rotate some of those cylinders. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom out. And I'm going to start grouping different parts of this hand here. So I'm going to group this finger here together, so that some of these parts start moving separately. So we're going to have to bend certain parts of this finger. And what I'm doing is I'm clicking and I'm dragging to create this marquee. So to select everything that's attached, or that I'm going over. That's why these joints here are turning the same color. And I'm going to go and pick up and connect those knuckles into the wedge of the hand. There we go. And I'm going to go to the side view here. I'm going to rotate this hand up. Let's just make sure that everything's selected. I'm going to rotate and bring this hand up. So just like this image here, we're going to be looking at the back side of this hand, and I'm going to start bending all of these fingers. It's this index finger here that bends a lot less than all these other fingers here. By the time I get back to that pinky, it should be bent more than all the other fingers. And then the thumb should also be slightly open as well. Let's go to the front view. I'll probably bring this a little bit forward. Front view. And this is also going to be at an angle, at a slight angle. But we could always rotate and change that angle a little bit later. So let's go ahead and start bending some of these fingers. Let's start zooming in on this index finger here. I'm going to ungroup. Just want to move everything together to make that a little bit easier. Alright, start with that first cylinder. And you can always put these windows side by side. That makes it easier. So that index finger is almost flat. Next is almost flat. Let's see how the next part of that index finger joint is, and it's slightly at an angle. Let's see what 45 degrees looks like, or a negative 45. I'm going to undo that and do a negative 45. I'm going to click on the arch, and then so I'm able to click on that text field and do a negative 45. Bring the joint over. You might also want to do this for the side here. And then we have to go back to the front. Zoom out to get that triangle, that cone. And let's go to the front view, see what that looks like. Alright, so make sure you're constantly going back and forth to the different views. And then move that. And point with the index finger. I'm going to grab everything there. And then move through. Let's see, let's go back. Grab that part. Right view, move it just a bit forward. Alright, so there's the index finger. And let's go back to the picture. I'll do this thumb next. So this, I'm going to go ahead and group. I'm going to move these cylinders here to the front. So I'm going to go to the top view. I'm going to group these and then rotate this whole shape. See what the image looks like. This is also going to start working with some of your memory here too, right? So you need to keep going back and forth to your image without looking at it for a while unless you have your images side by side. And then pretty soon you don't even need the reference to draw some of these images. I'm going to bend that thumb a little bit more. Also this, I'm also going to rotate this here. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and start working on this middle finger here. I'm going to look at some of the angles. They are pretty similar or parallel to the index finger, so you can also follow those same angles there. Make sure they're ungrouped. So this could be, let's see, negative 90. It's almost flat, and we'll just rotate just a little bit more. I'm going to go to the top view, so I can bring that forward a little bit easier. Then zoom in if you have to, so you're not clicking on one of these other different guides by accident. This was 45. Maybe slightly forward and then down. Go to the right view. I'm going to go to the front view now, just to make sure they're all aligned. You should also be able to click on front view. Grab your three objects and align them. Click on align. And then it previews what it's actually, or how it's going to align it. So I'm going to click this bottom indicator here. And everything's aligned on this axis here. I'm just going to move them over to the right. Just make sure I'm in front view. Don't need to be in the line anymore. So I clicked off of it, and I'm going to bring these down. Okay, then the ring finger would be bent just slightly more than the middle finger. Let me just move back just a little bit. There we go. Alright, let's go ahead and work on the middle finger here. And since these are going to be bent a little bit more, I'm going to bend this maybe about 100 degrees. Right, because this finger is going to be closed more than the middle finger and the ring finger. This is going to be bent a little bit more than 45 degrees. Just try to get to that arch there. Let's do -55. I'm also going to start bending this first cylinder here, connected to the knuckle. These other two could stay a little bit straight, but I'm going to start bending this one. Let's do maybe just -10 degrees. And then I'm going to work on these at the same time here. So that was -10. This one's going to be bent a little bit more. I'm going to click on that arch. Let's do -20. On this knuckle, I did a -55, so let's do maybe a -65. And I'm going to bend this one here just a little bit more. Let's do about -120. And then I'll just start aligning all those knuckles there. I'm going to go ahead and group these and hide them so they could get out of the viewpoint. So I'm going to group. Okay, now I'm going to make those other fingers visible again. I'm going to click back over here on this light bulb to show all. And I'm going to zoom out, and now it looks a lot more like a hand than it did before, right? So I'm going to go ahead and click on everything. Let's make it the same color. It's not grouped, even though it's the same color, it's not grouped. And I'm going to go ahead and I will group everything now, in case I have any issues rotating. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this one. Let's go back to the image here. So that's pretty close. This hand here is just a little bit bent. And then you have the wrist inside of the resource here. That's what that is. And this hand does go forward just a little bit. So I'm going to go over here, turn it down just a bit. Could probably also bring this thumb a little bit outward. So I'm going to ungroup. Zoom in. Alright, so there's that first hand there. You want to do the same thing with these other two hands as well. So try to create these other two illustrations and bring them to life by making them three-dimensionally. You also want to recreate this joint, this individual joint here. So you could probably start with this individual joint to get the idea of which different shapes you're going to need to create these illustrations inside of Tinkercad. And then let's say that you're all done, you have all three hands and that one smaller joint created. And then you want to go over here to export it as an STL. It's going to go inside of your downloads folder. So I'm going to go down here to File Explorer, hold down Control, tap the letter N, click on Downloads, and there's the Hand Wedge Complete version there. And so you drag it over to your project folder, and that's what you would submit into Teams. So you want to make sure that you have the cylinder fingers as an attachment, and then also the hand wedge or the completed version of the hand wedge with all three hands in that same file, and that's what you would upload inside of Teams. So if you have any questions of how to download that resource or reference, or which forms to bring over from the right hand side into Tinkercad, or if you're having trouble grouping some of the different shapes or hiding them to work on some of the different parts of this hand, go ahead and let me know. Thank you for watching the video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. And feel free to watch any of the other related videos.